Our pace of living leaves us little time for leisure. Our program will give you a chance to experience the fascinating world of traveling, extreme adventures, hunting and fishing. Each week we will take you to the most beautiful places of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a large country with vast territories, and it will take a long time to travel around the country. There are a lot of places worth visiting for tourists. Among them are historical sites and monuments, sanctuaries and national parks. Visiting the country will appeal to those who are keen on wild camping. Kazakhstan's national parks and sanctuaries are abundant with wild animals and rare plants. This time we decided to head off to the Charin National Park. The park was founded to save natural landscapes that have an ecological, historical and aesthetic value. It includes the valley of the river Charin. The park covers the territory from a bridge at the Koturtagay settlement in the south to the river delta in the north. The territory is surrounded by mountains and has lots of mountain hollows on both sides of the river. The Charin River Valley is a unique place where remains of prehistoric flora and fauna can be found. The Charin is the largest river in the region and has its inflow, the river Ili. Its length is 393 kilometers. The park is attractive to visit any time during the year. In the spring, the air smells blooming flowers and herbs. In the summertime, when it's hot, you can enjoy the shade from a rare ash tree. In the autumn, bright red ripening barberries bring their charm to the local landscape. When we were preparing for the trip to Charin and the Singing Barhan, quite popular tourist destinations, we wanted to enjoy the trip in a different way. We thought of excitement and flows of adrenaline. We came up with the right idea how to get most of the trip suddenly, thanks to Maxim Levitin, a traveler and a cameraman. He suggested that we split the expedition into two parts to enjoy visiting the Charin National Park to the full. Our plan was to visit the famous ash tree dacha, see the spectacular landscapes of the Boguty Valley, go kayaking down the river Charin as far as the Ili, and then go further down to the Singing Barhan to see what the river is like from a different, non-tourist perspective. Very few people know that the Ili riverside is a habitat for quite a lot of wild animals, and among them there are rare ones. No one has ever taken photos of the Ili Central Asian otter. This animal is very cautious and extremely difficult to come across. To see it, we studied its habitat in the area beforehand. The aim was to take photos of this rare species. We were contemplating the expedition would take no less than 1 week, considering we would go kayaking all the way through. Having fueled our off-road UAZ and having got stressed out negotiating the route with officials, we started the journey from Almaty early in the morning. It's a long way, although 400 kilometers one way is not much for Kazakhstan. While making our way, we were hoping to get permission to work out the route for ourselves. By 9 a.m., we stopped at the 213th kilometer of the Almaty-Kokpek-Kaktal highway. We reached the bridge of the river Charin, which is 30 kilometers from the center of the Uyghur region, the city of Chunji. Down the river is the famous ash tree woods. 10 million years ago, in the tertiary Miocene, this place was grazing place for Indicaterium and Megalosaurus giant lizards, whose staple food was the leaves of the Sogdian ash tree, the tree that has survived up to modern days and that has adjusted to sharply continental climate. The Sogdian ash tree has weathered the global climate change, but became nearly extinct because of the human activity. One of the main goals of the Charin National Park, which was created 10 years ago, is saving rare kinds of trees. The area of the Charin riverside, 25 km long, that covers 4,855 hectares, has been the heart of the Charin National Park for 10 years and is managed from the city of Chunja. We moped around the recreation area called Yasenyevaya Roshcha, Ash Tree Wood, looking at the tourist scene. We got the feeling we would not achieve the aim of the trip there. The Boguty mountains were awaiting us. In order to enter the territory of the national park, we had to get permission. The director of the park, Elnur Mohamedjanovich Akhmetov, received us but didn't seem to be willing to give the permission for videotaping. We learned that it is beyond the director's responsibility to give such permission, and it's the Committee of Hunt and Wildlife in Astana that deals with that. We had to make several phone calls to Astana to get the permission for a 2-day expedition to Boguty Mountains in order to see wild goats and go kayaking down the river within the 25-kilometer area of the national park. The park area is 127,000 hectares. This year is the 10th anniversary of the park, and we are congratulating the park's administration and staff and wish them not only to preserve the park's unique fauna and flora, but also restore them. First we decided to climb the mountains to find the goats, and hopefully find the eagle Balaban, and then split into 2 groups. The cameraman Maxim Levitsin's plan was to go kayaking down the Charin and hopefully videotape black-tailed gazelles inhabiting on the stony part of the Charin riverside. Then he was supposed to go on kayaking down the Ili river towards the Singing Barhan to videotape the inhabitants of the riparian forests. We, the second group, according to the plan, needed to walk across the park and in 7 days come across Maxim kayaking at the Ayalhan district, on the territory of the Manul Game Reserve. The estimated length of the route was 220 kilometers. Thanks to our handy UAZ vehicle, we could do another kilometer up a steep mountain road, halfway of the mountain height. We couldn't use the car anymore, as that was the end of the road. We had to get off the car to climb the mount in order to reach the top of Boguty. We didn't regret a moment when we reached the peak of Boguty. We enjoyed a wonderful panoramic view we had from the plateau. The river Ili looked like a thin snake-like silver line, and beyond that line we could see the snow caps of the Grand Jungar Alatau mountains. In the south there was a view of the snow-white peak of Kungay. The background of Kungay we could even see the 6,000-meter peaks of Terskey Alatau. In the west there were reflections of the sun on the silver surface of a saucepan-like water body. It took us a little while to recognize familiar Lake Kapchagai from that distance and location. We met the first wild goat on the way to the plateau. We saw a small herd of female goats that were accompanied by a few young male goats. They were slowly heading towards the peak of the mount. They spotted us too. We noticed that they were not scared of us. From time to time they stopped to look at us with curiosity. From the way animals behave, you could tell whether poachers bother animals or not. If animals get scared at the sight of a human, even from a distance of 1 kilometer, you could tell that the animals have been chased by poachers. For us, it was a good sign to see them being calm when they noticed us. That meant the animals had not been disturbed by poachers most of the year. Such animals can let people approach them as closely as 300 meters, and only then they may retreat in an organized way. They may stand in a line from distance observing visitors for a long time. Young male goats aged 3 to 5 years old form separate groups. Like human beings, these creatures tend to form groups by age. The number of species in such groups depends on the density of the goat population and the density of their population in their natural habitat. The higher the density of their population is, the more numerous the groups are. In Central Asian Tianshan, we could see herds as large as 300 species. Older goats, aged 7 and more, so-called rank 4 males, live in small groups from 4 to 7 goats. During the mating season, all pubescent and mature species form mixed herds. I have always been interested in how decisions are made in complex social groups. For example, a herd of animals may choose to go to the nearest gorge. The common belief is that dominant species lead the herd, either alpha males or the oldest females in the herd. But we have observed herds of goats for 100 times in different situations and under different conditions, and we cannot prove the belief about the alpha species. We often saw that one species, for example a female or even a goatling, leaves the herd for no obvious reason, and then another one follows that goatling, and then another 2 or 3 animals follow them, and very soon the whole herd follows those few. But when it comes to hazards, the herd usually has a guard. Usually this important role is carried out by an old female. The guard is usually positioned at a point with a good view of the area. When the guard sees there is a potential hazard, it emits a sharp whistle-like sound to signal there may be an enemy around. The whole herd immediately reacts to the signal, climbing high rocks away from the potential danger, and only then look around at what has happened. Poachers often use this behavioral pattern of wild goats. They climb the mountain ridges, whereas other poachers scare the herd and get them in a tight corner. If poachers do it regularly, wild goats pick it up quickly. They start to understand there may be a siege and scatter in different directions, sometimes even towards the poachers. Wild goats are capable of adjusting to the changing environment, which makes them succeed in the battle of the survival of the fittest. But nothing can help survive in the environment where human activity takes away the natural habitat of these animals. Despite the ban on hunting wild goats, their population is decreasing from year to year. 50 years ago, millions of hectares were inhabited by thousands of wild goats, argali and roe deers, and now these territories are wildlife-free. In light of the constant decrease in the number of wild animals, national parks represent a high value. The territories of these national parks are areas where cattle grazing, deforestation and any kinds of farming are either prohibited or strictly limited. The main principle that national parks are based on prevents from intimidating rare species inhabiting these protected areas. The fact that we have such areas is definitely a great achievement in protecting the wildlife. The most important thing is that national park areas are protected by law. This will allow new generations to enjoy the sights of indigenous wildlife in the same way as we did today when we were climbing the Mount of Boguty. This, of course, cannot be compared to climbing Kilimanjaro, but for us, Boguty is 100 times more valuable and beautiful than remote Yellowstone, for example. When we were climbing down the mountain, it was already dark. We spent the night in tents in the steppe that smelled wild herbs at the foot of the mountain. In the morning, Maxim, according to the plan, went kayaking down the river, and we went to the Ili riverside towards the Singing Barhan to find out more about new ecosystems, the desert and the riparian forests near the river. A new adventure was awaiting us.